The marble floors of the Crimson Rose Hotel seemed to tilt beneath my feet, each step echoing too loudly in my wine-soaked consciousness. I pressed one hand against the silk-papered wall, feeling the texture shift under my trembling fingers like waves on water. The fundraising gala downstairs had been suffocating, wealthy donors in designer gowns laughing at jokes I didn't understand, sipping champagne that cost more than my monthly rent while I balanced trays and smiled until my cheeks ached. But Sarah, my best friend, and the only reason I'd taken this catering job, had convinced me to stay for just one glass after our shift ended. 1 became 3. 3 became enough to make the chandelier lights blur into golden halos, and my usual caution evaporate like steam. "Room 2847, I muttered, squinting at the keycard Sarah had pressed into my hand. She'd arranged for us to use an employee restroom on the 28th floor, a small mercy after 10 hours in heels that had carved trenches into my ankles. The numbers on the doors swam before my eyes. 2843, 2845, 2847. The lock clicked open with a soft beep that seemed deafening in the hushed corridor. I stumbled inside, kicking off those torture devices masquerading as shoes before the door even closed behind me. The room was dark, illuminated only by the city lights bleeding through floor-to-ceiling windows. But something felt different, heavier. The air carried a scent I couldn't quite place. Expensive cologne, leather, and something darker, almost metallic, like copper pennies pressed against skin. I barely registered the wrongness before exhaustion dragged me toward what I assumed was a bed. My body collided with cool silk sheets that whispered against my skin, so different from the rough cotton I was used to. Heaven. Pure heaven. I buried my face into a pillow that smelled like cedar and winter nights, letting the spinning room fade into blessed darkness. Sleep pulled me under like a riptide. I didn't know how much time had passed when I felt it. The shift in the mattress. The sudden presence of another body. My alcohol-fogged brain registered warmth before danger, the heat of another person radiating against my back. Then came the arm, heavy and possessive, draping across my waist and pulling me against a chest that felt carved from stone. My eyes flew open, but the room remained dark. Panic cut through the wine haze like a blade through silk. This wasn't the employee room. This wasn't Sarah sleeping beside me. The body behind me was too large, too solid, too undeniably male. I tried to move, but the arm tightened with casual strength, as if my struggle was expected and entirely futile. A low sound rumbled from the chest pressed against my spine, not quite a word, more like a sleepy acknowledgement of my presence. "Don't," a voice said, rough with sleep, but carrying an authority that made my breath catch. The single word wasn't loud, but it resonated through my bones. "You came to me. Stay." My heart hammered against my ribs. I should scream. I should fight. But something in that voice, in the absolute certainty of it, paralyzed me. The hand on my waist splayed wider, fingers spanning the space between my ribs and hip with shocking familiarity, as though he'd held me like this 1,000 times before. My voice came out as a whisper, broken and afraid. "I'm in the wrong room. No." His lips brushed the shell of my ear, sending electricity down my spine. "You're exactly where you're supposed to be." The words should have terrified me. They did terrify me, but beneath the fear lurked something else. Something I didn't want to examine in the darkness with a stranger's arms around me. His thumb moved in slow circles against my stomach, the touch somehow both comforting and claiming, gentle yet utterly possessive. "Please," I breathed, though I wasn't sure what I was begging for anymore. He pulled me impossibly closer, eliminating even the whisper of space between us. I could feel every plane of his body, the expensive fabric of his shirt, the steady rhythm of his heartbeat against my shoulder blade. When he spoke again, his voice carried something that sounded almost like wonder. "You smell like jasmine and rain," he murmured, his nose tracing the curve of my neck. "And you're shaking like a trapped bird." The comparison made me freeze. Trapped, that's exactly what I was. "I need to go," I said, trying to inject strength into my voice and failing miserably. "No." The word was simple, final. His hand moved from my waist to tangle in my hair, fingers threading through the loose strands with a gentleness that contradicted the iron in his tone. Sleep. We'll talk when the sun rises. You can't just... I can. The certainty in those 2 words was absolute. And I am. I should have fought harder. Should have screamed, clawed, done anything but let sleep drag me back under. But the warmth surrounding me, the strange sense of safety despite the obvious danger, the wine still clouding my judgment, all of it conspired to pull me back into darkness. When I woke again, dawn painted the room in shades of silver and rose. The arm was gone, but I could feel eyes on me. I turned slowly, my heart climbing into my throat. He sat in a leather chair beside the bed, perfectly still, watching me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. The morning light revealed what darkness had hidden, a face that could have been carved by a master sculptor, all sharp angles and brutal beauty. He couldn't have been much older than 30, but his eyes held centuries of knowledge, of violence, of absolute control. Dark hair fell across his forehead, slightly mussed, the only thing about him that seemed even remotely vulnerable. He wore black slacks and a white shirt, partially unbuttoned, revealing a chest marked with scars that told stories I didn't want to know. On the table beside him lay a gun, casual as a book, and 2 cell phones that kept lighting up with messages he ignored. Good morning, Bellezza. His voice in the daylight was smoother than it had been in darkness, cultured and precise, with the faintest trace of an accent I couldn't place. Did you sleep well in my bed? I pulled the sheets up to my chin, suddenly aware that I was still in my catering uniform, a black skirt and white blouse, now hopelessly wrinkled. I told you, I'm in the wrong room. I need to leave. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of a predator that had already decided on its prey. You entered my private suite, Kara. Climbed into my bed, pressed that soft body against mine and sighed like you'd found home. He paused, letting each word sink in. And now you think you can simply walk away? It was a mistake, I insisted, my voice climbing toward hysteria. I was drunk. I thought this was room 2847. He picked up one of the phones, scrolling through something with casual efficiency. This is the penthouse suite. Access requires specific authorization. So either you're a very talented thief, his eyes lifted to mine, pinning me in place, or someone gave you that key card. The implications crashed over me like ice water. Sarah. She'd given me the card. But why would she? The door opened without a knock, and a man entered carrying a tray. He was built like a wall, dressed in a suit that barely contained his shoulders, with a Bluetooth earpiece and dead eyes that swept the room with practiced precision. He set the tray on the table, espresso, fresh pastries, fruit, without looking at me once, then exited as silently as he'd entered. Breakfast? My captor said pleasantly, as if we were old friends. You must be hungry. Who are you? The question burst from me, desperate and afraid. He stood, moving with a grace that seemed impossible for someone so clearly dangerous. When he approached the bed, I pressed back against the headboard, but he simply picked up a strawberry from the tray and brought it to my lips. Eat, he commanded softly. I turned my face away. No. His free hand caught my chin, forcing me to look at him. This close, I could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, the thin scar cutting through his left eyebrow, the absolute lack of mercy in his expression. I don't repeat myself, Bellezza. Eat. Something in his tone told me this wasn't about the strawberry. It was about obedience, about establishing exactly who held power in this room. My stomach twisted with fear, and something else I refused to name as I opened my mouth and let him feed me the fruit. His pupils dilated slightly as I bit down, juice staining my lips. He watched my mouth with an intensity that made heat crawl up my neck. Good girl, he murmured, his thumb wiping away the juice with a touch so gentle it made my eyes burn. My name is Dante Moretti, and you, little bird who flew into my cage, are going to tell me everything. The name meant nothing to me then. I was just a girl who worked 3 jobs to afford a studio apartment in the worst part of town, who sent money to her sick mother every month, who'd never even gotten a speeding ticket. I had no idea that Dante Moretti's name made grown men cross themselves and check over their shoulders. I didn't know that his family controlled half the city's underground, that his word was law in places the police feared to go. All I knew was that I'd made a terrible mistake, and the man watching me with hungry, possessive eyes had no intention of letting me leave. "I don't know anything," I whispered. He smiled again, and this time it reached his eyes, transforming his face into something even more dangerous, beauty with the promise of destruction. "Then we'll start with your name." He settled onto the bed beside me, close enough that I could feel his heat. "And why someone would send an innocent creature like you into the monster's lair." "Emma," I whispered, my name feeling like a surrender on my tongue. "Emma Chen." Dante's eyes darkened with something that looked like satisfaction. He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear with a gentleness that contradicted everything else about him. "Emma," he repeated, as if tasting each syllable. "And who gave you the keycard, Emma?" "My friend Sarah. She worked here, in events coordination." My words tumbled out in a rush. "She said it was an employee restroom." I swear I didn't know. "Sarah Milbrook?" His expression didn't change, but something shifted in the air, growing colder. He picked up one of his phones, typed something quickly, then set it down. "Blonde, mid-20s, drives a silver Honda?" Terror squeezed my chest. "Please don't hurt her. She probably just grabbed the wrong keycard. It was an honest mistake." Dante's laugh was soft and utterly devoid of humor. "There are no honest mistakes in my world, Bellezza. Only calculated moves and the people foolish enough to make them." He stood, walking to the window, his silhouette framed by the morning sun. "Your friend has been feeding information to Marcus Castellano for 3 months. Guest lists, security rotations, access codes." The name Marcus Castellano meant nothing to me, but the way Dante's shoulders tensed when he said it spoke volumes. "No," I protested weakly. "Sarah wouldn't betray you?" He turned, and the look on his face made my blood run cold. "She sent you to my room, Emma, a drunk, vulnerable woman stumbling into the bed of a man she was told would be occupied elsewhere." His jaw tightened. "You were supposed to be found here, photographed perhaps, used as leverage or humiliation. Instead, I came back early from a meeting that ran short and found you." The implications crashed through my wine-fogged brain. I'd been bait, a pawn in some game I didn't understand, played by people I thought were friends. "I need to go home," I said, my voice breaking. "Please, I won't tell anyone about this. I'll disappear. You'll never see me again." Dante crossed the room in 3 strides, gripping my chin and forcing me to meet his gaze. "You think I'd let you walk out of here after you've been in my bed, after you've seen my face, after your scent is on my sheets?" His thumb traced my lower lip with possessive slowness. "You're not going anywhere, little bird. Not until I decide what to do with you." Tears burned behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "You can't keep me here." "Can't I?" He released my chin, but his hand moved to my throat, fingers spanning the delicate column without pressing, just resting there like a collar. "I own this hotel, Emma. I own the building where you live, that pathetic studio on Mitchell Street with the broken elevator and rats in the walls. I know about your mother in the care facility, about the debts you're drowning in, about every desperate choice you've made to stay afloat." Each word was a nail in my coffin. He'd already investigated me, probably while I slept. The realization of how thoroughly trapped I was made my breath come in shallow gasps. "Please," I whispered. His expression softened fractionally, something almost like regret flickering across his features. "You keep saying that word as if it holds power." He leaned closer, his lips brushing my temple. "The only power here is mine, but I'm not a monster despite what you're thinking. I won't hurt you, Emma, not unless you force my hand. Then let me go." "No." The word was gentle but absolute. "You're under my protection now, whether you want it or not." Before I could process that statement, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his expression hardened into something terrifying. "My men found Sarah. She's being questioned." Nausea rolled through my stomach. What does that mean? It means she's explaining her arrangement with Castellano in great detail. He stood, buttoning his shirt with efficient movements. Marco will drive you to my residence. You'll stay there while I handle this situation. Your residence? I scrambled off the bed, my bare feet hitting plush carpet. I'm not going anywhere with you. Dante's hand shot out, gripping my wrist with controlled strength. He pulled me against his chest, close enough that I could see the dangerous glint in his eyes. You have two choices, Bellezza. Come willingly, or I'll carry you out of here over my shoulder. Either way, you're mine now. The possessiveness in his voice should have repulsed me. Instead, some broken part of my psyche responded to it, recognized it as a twisted form of safety in a world that had just revealed itself to be far more dangerous than I'd known. Why? The question came out broken. Why do you even care? Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, or recognition. His free hand came up to cut my cheek, thumb stroking along my cheekbone with devastating gentleness. Because the moment you curled into my arms last night, you became mine to protect. Because you looked at me this morning with fear. Yes, but also with something pure. Something I haven't seen in a decade. Because... He paused, seeming to wrestle with something internal. Because I choose to. And what I claim, I keep. 20 minutes later, I found myself in the back of a black SUV with windows tinted so dark, the outside world became a blur. Marco, the wall of muscle who'd brought breakfast, drove in silence while another equally intimidating man sat in the passenger seat. Both wore earpieces and had the dead-eyed look of people who'd done terrible things without losing sleep. I'd been allowed to grab my shoes and bag, nothing more. Dante had watched me dress with predatory focus, then handed me off to his men with instructions I hadn't been allowed to hear. The vehicle glided through morning traffic, taking turns that led away from the city center and toward the hills where old money lived behind gates and walls. My phone buzzed in my bag. My manager at the diner, probably wondering why I hadn't shown up for my morning shift. I reached for it, but Marco's eyes found mine in the rearview mirror. Mr. Moretti said no calls. I need to let my work know, already handled. His voice was flat, devoid of emotion. You're on indefinite leave. Paid. The casual way he said it, as if Dante rearranging my entire life was perfectly normal, made my hands shake. I stared out the window, watching my independence, my agency, my freedom disappear with every mile. The gates that finally opened for us were wrought iron and 12 feet tall, topped with decorative spikes that were probably more functional than ornamental. The driveway curved through manicured gardens that belonged on magazine covers, leading to a mansion that made the hotel penthouse look modest. Out, Marco said, opening my door. I stepped onto cobblestones, craning my neck to take in the 3-story structure of pale stone and arched windows. It looked like something transplanted from European aristocracy, all elegant lines and old-world wealth. Ivy climbed one wall, and a fountain bubbled in the circular drive, the sound of water somehow emphasizing the absolute silence surrounding the property. The front door opened before we reached it. A woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and a crisp black dress appeared, her expression professionally neutral. Miss Chen, I'm Mrs. Castellano, the housekeeper. Welcome. The name made me stumble. Castellano, like Marcus. No relation. Her lips thinned. It's a common name. Please follow me. Inside, the mansion was a study in contrasts. Antique furniture alongside modern art, marble floors beneath crystal chandeliers, beauty built on a foundation of old violence. Mrs. Castellano led me through hallways that seemed to stretch forever, finally stopping at a door on the second floor. This will be your room. She opened it, revealing a space larger than my entire apartment. A 4-poster bed dominated one wall, draped in silk the color of champagne. French doors opened onto a balcony overlooking gardens that rolled toward distant woods. Mr. Moretti has requested you make yourself comfortable. Your measurements have been sent to his personal shopper. Clothes will arrive this afternoon. My measurements. The violation of it made my voice sharp. How does he... Mr. Moretti is very thorough. She moved to a dresser, opening drawers to show they'd already been stocked with basics, toiletries, undergarments in exactly my size, pajamas. Lunch is at 1, dinner at 7. You're free to move about the house and grounds, but... Her eyes met mine with surprising compassion. "Don't try to leave, dear. For your own safety." She left me alone in my golden cage. I spent the next hour exploring my prison. The bathroom was obscene, a marble shower large enough for 4 people, a tub that could double as a small pool, towels so soft they felt like clouds. The closet was empty but massive, waiting to be filled with clothes I hadn't chosen, hadn't earned, didn't want. I tried the balcony doors, unlocked. The drop was significant, but not impossible. I could see guards, discreet but present, moving through the gardens below. One looked up, making direct eye contact, and touched his earpiece. Message received. I was being watched. My phone buzzed again. This time, when I checked it, there was a new message from an unknown number. "Your mother's care facility received a payment covering the next 2 years. She's been moved to a private room with round-the-clock nursing. This is not kindness, Emma. This is insurance. Behave, and she stays comfortable. Run, and I'll move her to a facility where they'll barely remember to feed her. D." The phone slipped from my shaking hands, clattering onto the marble floor. He'd threatened my mother, casually, efficiently, without raising his voice or his hand. This was the real Dante Moretti, not the man who'd held me gently in the darkness, but the monster who controlled lives like chess pieces. I sank onto the bed, finally letting the tears fall. I cried for my stupidity, for trusting Sarah, for getting drunk and stumbling into a nightmare I couldn't wake from. I cried, because somewhere in the last few hours, I'd started to feel something other than fear when Dante looked at me, and that terrified me more than anything else. When the sobs finally subsided, I found myself staring at my reflection in the mirror across the room. Mascara tracked down my cheeks, my hair was a mess, and my eyes were red and swollen. I looked exactly like what I was. A girl in over her head, drowning in waters too deep and dark to navigate. But beneath the fear and tears, something else stirred. Anger. Hot and bright and sustaining. Dante Moretti might have caged me, might have bought my compliance with threats and money, but he didn't own me. Not really. Not where it mattered. I cleaned my face, straightened my spine, and made a decision. I'd play his game, learn his rules, and find a way to turn them against him. Because monsters, no matter how beautiful, always had weaknesses. I just had to survive long enough to find his. Lunch arrived on a silver cart, wheeled in by a young woman who wouldn't meet my eyes. She laid out dishes that looked like art. Delicate pasta with truffle shavings, salad dressed in something that smelled like heaven, bread still warm from the oven. Food I'd served to wealthy people but never tasted myself. "Mr. Moretti called," she said quietly, arranging everything on the small table by the window. "He'll be dining with you tonight. He requests you wear one of the dresses being delivered this afternoon." The presumption of it made my jaw clench. "And if I refuse?" She finally looked at me, and I saw something like pity in her eyes. "Please don't make things harder than they need to be. He's not a patient man when defied." She hesitated at the door, but he's fair, in his way, if you're smart about it. After she left, I stared at the food, my stomach warring with my pride. Eventually, hunger won. I ate slowly, savoring flavors I'd never experienced, hating myself a little for enjoying my captivity's luxuries. The clothes arrived at 3 o'clock, dozens of garment bags carried in by 2 women who measured me with professional efficiency, tutting over my protests. They left behind a wardrobe worth more than I'd earn in 5 years, designer dresses, casual wear, shoes that probably cost more than my car. Everything in my exact size, chosen by someone who understood my coloring, my shape, my style better than I did myself. I chose the simplest dress for dinner. Navy blue, modest neckline, hem that hit just above my knees. A small rebellion, picking the least provocative option. But when I looked in the mirror, even this simple dress transformed me. The fabric moved like water, the cut emphasizing curves I usually hid under loose uniforms and thrift store jeans. Dante arrived exactly at 7. I heard him before I saw him. Footsteps in the hallway, the murmur of voices, then silence. The knock on my door was courtesy he didn't need to extend, a gesture that somehow made everything worse. "Come in," I said, proud that my voice didn't shake. He entered, and the air changed. He'd showered and changed since this morning, now wearing charcoal slacks and a black shirt that emphasized his lean, dangerous frame. His hair was slightly damp, and I caught the scent of his cologne, that same cedar and winter nights that had clung to his pillow. His eyes traveled over me slowly, thoroughly, with an appreciation that made heat crawl up my neck. "Beautiful," he murmured. "Though you'd be beautiful in anything, or nothing." I crossed my arms over my chest. "Is that what this is about? You want me in your bed?" Something flickered across his face. Amusement. Maybe annoyance. He closed the distance between us with predatory grace, backing me against the wall beside the mirror. One hand came up to brace beside my head, caging me without touching. "If I wanted you in my bed, Emma, you'd already be there." His voice was low, intimate. "This is about keeping you safe while I clean up the mess your friend created. Marcus Castellano doesn't forgive easily. Sarah gave him information that cost me 3 shipments and 2 good men. When he discovers his little spy has been compromised, he'll look for leverage. And you." His free hand came up to trace my jaw. "You're the perfect target, the innocent girl who stumbled into my life. He'd use you to get to me. So this is protection?" I tried to sound skeptical, but his proximity was doing things to my pulse I didn't want to acknowledge. "Protection. Possession." He leaned closer, his lips brushing my ear. "With me, there's little difference. What I claim, I keep safe. What threatens mine, I destroy. I'm not yours." His laugh was dark and rich. "Keep telling yourself that, Bellezza. Maybe eventually you'll believe it." He pulled back, offering his arm with old-world courtesy that jarred against everything else. "Come, dinner's getting cold." The dining room could have seated 20, but the table was set for 2, intimate despite the grandeur. Candles flickered between crystal glasses, casting dancing shadows on walls hung with paintings I suspected were originals. Dante held my chair, his hands lingering on my shoulders before he took his own seat. Staff appeared and disappeared like ghosts, serving courses I couldn't name. Dante watched me throughout, asking questions that seemed innocuous, but weren't, about my childhood, my mother, my dreams. I answered carefully, revealing nothing important while he revealed everything through what he didn't say. He'd grown up in this house. His father had been in business, a euphemism that needed no translation. His mother had died when he was 12, a tragedy he mentioned once and dismissed immediately. But I saw the flash of old pain in his eyes. He'd inherited his empire at 25 when his father was killed and spent the next 5 years consolidating power through methods he didn't detail. "You're afraid of me," he said halfway through the main course, setting down his wineglass. "But you're not running. Why?" I met his gaze steadily. "You threatened my mother. Where exactly would I run? You could try." He leaned back, studying me. "Others have. They rarely succeed, but the attempt itself reveals character. Is that what you want? For me to run so you can chase me?" His smile was slow and dangerous. "I want you to stay because you choose to. But we both know that's not happening yet." He stood, moving around the table to stand behind my chair. His hands settled on my shoulders, thumbs tracing the curve of my neck. "So instead, I'll settle for you staying because you're smart enough to recognize safety when it's offered. This isn't safety. It's a cage. A cage with silk sheets and protection from men who'd do far worse than imprison you." His breath stirred my hair. "Sarah talked before she died, Emma. She told Marcus everything, including that she sent you to my room. He thinks you're my weakness now, my soft spot." The words, "before she died," echoed in my head, making my stomach lurch. "You killed her?" "No." His hands tightened fractionally. "Marcus did. Once he realized she'd been compromised. He sent me a message with her body, a declaration of war using your friend's corpse as stationery." I jerked away from his touch, standing so quickly my chair toppled backward. "You're monsters. All of you." "Yes." He didn't deny it, didn't soften it. "But I'm the monster standing between you and worse ones. Remember that, Bellezza, before you decide I'm your enemy." That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced my golden cage, wearing a path in the plush carpet, jumping at every sound. Around midnight, I heard footsteps in the hallway outside my door. They paused, and I held my breath. But whoever it was moved on. The next morning, Mrs. Castellano informed me that Dante had left before dawn for business and wouldn't return until evening. I spent the day exploring the mansion under the watchful eyes of guards who appeared whenever I ventured too far. In the library, I found photographs hidden in a drawer. Dante as a child, with a beautiful dark-haired woman who must have been his mother. They were laughing, her arms around him, love evident in every line of their bodies. The boy in the photo had light in his eyes that the man I knew had lost somewhere along the way. He doesn't like people seeing those. I spun to find Marco in the doorway, his expression unreadable. I didn't mean to pry. Everyone pries. He expects it. Marco moved into the room with surprising quiet for such a large man. But those photos, she was the last person who saw him as human instead of weapon. After she died, he became what he needed to be to survive. Why are you telling me this? Marco's eyes met mine, and I saw something unexpected, concern. Because he looks at you the way he used to look at her, like you're something precious in a world of broken things, and that makes you either very lucky or very doomed. I haven't decided which yet. He left me alone with photographs and implications I didn't want to examine. Dante returned that evening covered in blood. I was in the garden when I heard the commotion. SUVs roaring up the drive, men shouting, the organized chaos of crisis. I ran toward the house, my heart in my throat, and found Dante being helped from a vehicle by Marco and 2 other men. Blood soaked his left side, turning his white shirt crimson. His face was pale but composed, jaw tight against pain he refused to voice. When his eyes found mine across the courtyard, something in his expression shifted, softened, almost. Emma. My name on his lips sounded like relief. Get back inside. Instead, I ran to him. Some instinct older than reason propelled me forward, past the guards, past common sense. I reached for him, my hands fluttering uselessly over his injuries. You're hurt. You need a hospital. No hospitals. His hand caught mine, blood slick and warm. Too many questions. We have a doctor on call, but... Inside. Now. The command was softened by the way his thumb stroked my wrist, a gesture of reassurance from a man bleeding out in his own driveway. They brought him to a room I hadn't seen before. Part medical clinic, part armory, fully equipped for treating injuries that couldn't be explained to authorities. A gray-haired man in surgical scrubs appeared within minutes, already barking orders at assistants who materialized from nowhere. I tried to follow, but Marco blocked my path. Let the doctor work. I need to... What? What did I need? This man had kidnapped me, threatened me, turned my life inside out. I shouldn't care that he was bleeding, shouldn't feel like my chest was caving in at the thought of him hurt, but I did. God help me, I did. He'll be fine, Marco said, not unkindly. This isn't his first bullet, won't be his last. 3 hours later, Dante appeared at my door, shirtless, bandaged from ribs to hip, but standing on his own. His skin was pale against the white gauze, emphasizing the scars I'd glimpsed that first morning. A roadmap of violence survived. You shouldn't be walking, I said, rising from the chair where I'd been pretending to read. Probably not. He moved into the room, closing the door behind him with deliberate care. But I needed to see you. Why? He crossed to where I stood, each step clearly painful, though he tried to hide it. When he reached me, his hand came up to cup my face with devastating gentleness, because when I thought I might die tonight, the last thing I wanted to see was your face. Because you ran to me when you should have run away. Because... His thumb traced my lower lip. Because I'm starting to think you're more dangerous to me than any bullet. My breath caught. Dante. He kissed me. Not rough or demanding, but soft, almost questioning. His lips moved over mine with a tenderness that made my eyes sting with unshed tears. I should push him away. Should remember he was my captor, my jailer, the monster who'd upended my life. Instead, I kissed him back. My hands found his bare shoulders, careful of his injuries, and I poured everything into that kiss. Fear, anger, confusion, and something dangerously close to longing. He groaned against my mouth, deepening the kiss, his hand tangling in my hair with possessive hunger. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against mine. "You're mine, Emma," he whispered. "Say it." I should refuse, should maintain the last shreds of my dignity and independence, but with his blood still under my fingernails and his taste on my lips, I whispered the truth that terrified me. "I'm yours." The next 6 weeks blurred together like watercolors in rain, beautiful and terrifying and impossible to hold on to. Dante healed slowly, stubbornly refusing to rest as much as the doctor ordered. I found myself in his room more nights than not, initially under the pretense of checking his bandages, but eventually simply because neither of us could sleep apart anymore. He'd pull me against his chest, careful of his healing wound, and we'd talk in the darkness. He told me about his mother, how she'd loved gardening and opera, how she'd tried to shield him from his father's world until cancer stole her away. I told him about mine, the stroke that had left her unable to speak, how I'd worked myself to exhaustion trying to afford her care, how I'd failed anyway until he'd intervened. "You didn't fail," he murmured one night, his fingers tracing patterns on my bare shoulder. We'd crossed that final line 3 days after he'd been shot, a collision of need and fear, and something neither of us wanted to name. "You were drowning, and no one threw you a rope. I just happened to be the one who noticed. You noticed because I literally fell into your bed." His laugh rumbled through his chest into mine. Fate has a twisted sense of humor. He pressed a kiss to my temple, but I'm not complaining about the delivery method. During the days, while Dante handled his business, I explored my new existence. Mrs. Castellano taught me which wines paired with which meals. Marco, surprisingly, became something like a friend, teaching me to shoot in the basement range because everyone close to the boss needs to know how to protect themselves. The other guards, Alessandro, Victor, Chen, slowly warmed to me, their initial suspicion fading into protective acceptance. I was becoming part of Dante's world, and the realization should have terrified me more than it did, but it was the nights that undid me. Dante's possessiveness in private was absolute and overwhelming. He mapped every inch of my body with reverent attention, whispering Italian endearments I didn't understand but felt in my bones. He was simultaneously gentle and demanding, treating me like something precious he was terrified of breaking, but couldn't stop touching. "You're thinking too loud," he said one evening, finding me on my balcony staring at the sunset. He wrapped his arms around me from behind, his chin resting on my shoulder. "What's troubling you, Bellezza? This can't last." The words escaped before I could stop them. "Whatever this is between us, it's built on threats and captivity and choice." He turned me to face him, his hands framing my face. "You could leave, Emma. I haven't locked your door in 3 weeks. The guards have orders to let you go if you ask." My heart stuttered. "What?" "I meant what I said about protection, but I won't keep you prisoner if you truly want to leave. I'll maintain your mother's care regardless. You're free to walk away." His thumb stroked my cheek, and I saw something vulnerable in his eyes. Fear that he was trying to hide. "But I'm asking you to stay, not because I'm forcing you, but because you want to. You threatened my mother. I secured her future. There's a difference." He pulled back slightly, giving me space to breathe. "I won't pretend I played fair in the beginning. I didn't. But somewhere between that first morning and now, this became real for me. You became real. And I need to know if it's real for you too, or if you're just surviving until you can escape." I stared at him, this beautiful monster who'd stolen me, and somehow made me want to stay. "I don't know what's real anymore. Then figure it out." He pressed a kiss to my forehead, achingly gentle. "I'll wait. I'm a patient man when it matters." That night, I lay awake long after Dante fell asleep beside me, his arm heavy across my waist even in unconsciousness. I could leave. He'd given me that choice, that power. I could walk away from this twisted fairy tale and return to my old life of struggling and surviving. But my old life felt like a dream now, something that had happened to someone else. And the thought of leaving Dante, of never feeling his arms around me, never hearing him whisper my name in the darkness, made my chest ache with loss for something I'd still have in the morning. I was falling in love with my captor, and I had no idea how to save myself. The crisis came on a Tuesday. I was in the library, curled up with a book I wasn't really reading, when Marco burst through the door with an urgency that made my blood run cold. "We need to move you. Now." He was already pulling me to my feet. "Castellano's men hit one of our warehouses. They're coming here. Where's Dante?" "Handling it. He sent me to get you to the safe room." Marco propelled me into the hallway, where 4 other guards had materialized, all armed and tense. "They won't get through our defenses, but he's not taking chances with you." We'd made it halfway down the grand staircase when the windows exploded. Glass rained down like deadly snow as bullets tore through the entrance hall. Marco threw me to the ground, his body covering mine as the world erupted into violence. I heard shouting, gunfire, the wet sounds of bullets finding flesh. Someone screamed. One of Dante's men, I thought, but couldn't be sure over the ringing in my ears. "Stay down!" Marco hauled me up when there was a lull, practically carrying me down the remaining stairs. We made it to the kitchen before I heard the voice that made my blood freeze. "Where is she?" The accent was thick, Italian but different from Dante's refined tones, rougher, crueler. The girl. "Where's Moretti's little whore?" "Marcus Castellano." It had to be. Marco shoved me toward a door hidden behind a pantry shelf. "Safe room. Code is 0412. Don't come out until Dante or I come for you." "Marco. Go." He pushed me through, and I heard the lock engage behind me before his footsteps retreated. The safe room was small, concrete, lit by emergency lighting. Monitors showed different areas of the house, all of them now filled with armed men fighting, bleeding, dying. I searched frantically for Dante among the chaos, but couldn't find him. Then one screen flickered, showing the entrance hall. Dante stood in the center of the carnage, flanked by his remaining guards, facing a man who could only be Marcus Castellano. They were talking, but I had no audio. I watched Dante's face, cold, controlled, showing nothing, while Marcus gestured wildly, clearly furious. Then Marcus pulled out a phone, showed Dante something on the screen, and smiled. Dante's expression didn't change, but I saw his hand tighten on his gun. Whatever Marcus had shown him, it was bad. The screen went dark. I don't know how long I waited in that concrete tomb, listening to gunfire fade to silence. Then nothing. Every minute felt like hours. I tried the code on the door repeatedly, but it wouldn't open from inside. I was trapped, helpless, imagining every terrible scenario. When the door finally opened, I nearly collapsed with relief, but it wasn't Dante standing there. It was a man I'd never seen. Young, cold-eyed, with a gun pointed directly at my chest. Behind him stood Marcus Castellano, older than I'd expected, gray-haired and elegant in a suit that probably cost more than a car. "Emma Chen," Marcus said, his voice smooth and cultured. "At last. You're much prettier than your photograph suggested." I backed away until I hit the wall. "Where's Dante?" "Indisposed." Marcus stepped into the safe room, leaving his man to guard the door. We had a fascinating conversation, he and I, about loyalty, about consequences, about what happens when someone takes something that belongs to me. I don't belong to anyone. His laugh was cruel. "My dear, you belonged to me the moment Sarah Millbrook agreed to send you to Moretti's bed. You were my investment, my future leverage. Imagine my surprise when Dante decided to keep you instead of simply using you." He circled me slowly, predator assessing prey, "But perhaps this works out better. Killing you in front of him will hurt far more than any bullet." Terror turned my blood to ice. "He'll kill you for this. He'll try." Marcus grabbed my arm, his grip bruising. "But first, he'll watch you die. He'll hear you beg. And he'll know that everyone he loves eventually leaves him, one way or another." He dragged me from the safe room, through hallways now littered with bodies I tried not to look at too closely. My mind raced, searching for escape routes, weapons, anything, but I was unarmed and surrounded by men who killed for a living. We emerged into the entrance hall, and I saw him. Dante knelt in the center of the room, held at gunpoint by 2 of Marcus's men. Blood ran from a cut above his eye, and his shirt was torn, but his eyes, when they locked onto mine, blazed with such fury I felt the heat of it across the distance. "Let her go, Marcus." His voice was deadly calm. "This is between us." "No, Dante. You made it about her when you chose to keep her. Marcus shoved me forward and I stumbled but didn't fall. You always were sentimental, like your father. It's what got him killed too. Dante's jaw clenched. Touch her, and I'll spend the rest of my life making you beg for death. Threatening me? While on your knees? Marcus pulled out a gun, pressing it against my temple. The metal was cold. Final. Say goodbye, Moretti. Everything happened at once. Dante moved with impossible speed, somehow twisting away from his guards. Gunfire erupted. I felt Marcus jerk beside me, the gun falling from my temple as he crumpled. Warm blood splattered across my face. And I was screaming, I think, but couldn't hear it over the ringing in my ears. Strong arms wrapped around me, pulling me down and covering me as chaos exploded overhead. I knew those arms, that scent, that heartbeat against my back. I've got you. Dante breathed against my hair. I've got you, Bellezza. You're safe. When the shooting stopped, when the silence descended like snow, Dante helped me stand. Marcus lay dead at our feet, along with most of his men. The entrance hall looked like a massacre, which I supposed it was. Don't look, Dante said, turning my face into his chest. Just hold on to me. I gripped his shirt, my hands shaking so violently I could barely maintain my hold. I thought he'd kill you. I thought... Shh. He pressed kisses into my hair, my forehead, my tear-stained cheeks. I'm fine. You're fine. It's over. But it wasn't over. Not really. Because as Marco appeared, limping but alive, and began organizing cleanup, as police sirens wailed in the distance only to be mysteriously diverted, I realized the truth. This was Dante's world. Violence and blood and men dying in elegant entrance halls. And I'd chosen to stay in it. Chosen him. Despite everything. Take me upstairs, I whispered against his chest. Please. I need... He understood without me finishing, scooping me into his arms despite his injuries, despite the blood and chaos. He carried me up the grand staircase to my room. Our room, really, since I hadn't slept alone in weeks. He undressed me gently, washing Marcus's blood from my skin with warm water and tender hands. Then he held me while I shattered, while delayed shock crashed through me in waves that left me gasping. I'm here, he murmured, over and over. I'm here, and I'm not letting go. Blocko 5, final. The weeks following the attack blurred into a strange new normal. Dante's men swept the mansion, replacing shattered windows and blood-stained marble, until no evidence remained of the violence that had occurred. Marcus Castellano's death was ruled a mob hit, which technically it was. The remaining players in his organization either pledged loyalty to Dante or disappeared in ways I didn't ask about. I should have been traumatized. Should have run the moment I could stand without shaking. Instead, I found myself clinging tighter to the monster who'd saved me, who looked at me like I was the only light in his dark world. You're thinking too loud again, Dante said one morning, finding me in the garden where I'd taken to spending my afternoons. Spring had arrived, transforming the grounds into an explosion of color that his mother would have loved. I turned to face him, this beautiful, dangerous man who somehow owned pieces of me I hadn't known existed. I'm thinking about staying. Something flickered in his eyes. Hope. Fierce and bright. As opposed to running, like I should have done months ago. I moved into his arms, letting him wrap himself around me like armor. I'm supposed to be terrified of you, of this life, but instead, I just keep falling deeper. His hand came up to tangle in my hair, tilting my face to his. Then fall, Bellezza. I'll catch you. I'll always catch you. He kissed me with aching tenderness. Marry me. I pulled back, certain I'd misheard. What? Marry me. He said it again, stronger this time. Make it official. Make it forever. Let me give you my name, my protection, everything I have. His thumb traced my jaw. I know it's insane. I know I should give you more time, more normalcy, but I've never been good at denying what I want. And I want you. Permanently. My heart hammered against my ribs. Dante, this is crazy. We barely know each other. I know you cry at sad movies, but pretend you don't. I know you send half your allowance to children's charities anonymously. I know you're terrified of heights, but went on the balcony anyway to see the sunset. I know the exact sound you make when I touch you right here." His hand traced a path that made me gasp. "And I know that I would burn this city to ash before I let anything hurt you. So tell me, Emma, what else do I need to know?" I stared at him. This man who'd stolen me, and somehow made me want to be stolen. The rational part of my brain screamed warnings, but my heart, my traitorous, foolish heart, whispered yes. "Okay," I breathed. His eyes widened fractionally. "Okay? Yes, I'll marry you." I laughed at the absurdity of it. I must be insane. We're both insane. He kissed me then, deep and claiming, pouring everything into it until I couldn't remember why I'd ever thought to refuse. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. "I love you," he said, the words rough and unpracticed, as if he'd never said them before. I didn't think I was capable of it anymore. But then you stumbled into my life drunk and terrified, and you've been unraveling me ever since. I love you too. The admission felt like jumping off a cliff, terrifying and exhilarating. Even though you're a criminal and a monster and you literally kidnapped me. I prefer aggressively courted. His smile was pure wickedness, and you walked into my room, remember? Drunk. By mistake. Best mistake of my life. He pulled a box from his pocket, velvet, antique, clearly something precious. Inside sat a ring that made my breath catch. A deep blue sapphire surrounded by diamonds, set in platinum that had been worn smooth by time. This was my mother's, and her mother's before that. It's the only thing of value my father never touched, never sold or traded. She made him promise it would go to someone worthy when I found her. Tears burned behind my eyes as he slipped it onto my finger. Perfect fit, as if it had been waiting for me. It's beautiful. You're beautiful. He kissed my knuckles, just above the ring. And mine. Finally, completely mine. We married 2 weeks later in the mansion's garden, under the same trees where his mother had planted roses decades ago. No guests except his most trusted men and Mrs. Castellano, who cried through the entire ceremony. Dante wore a dark suit that made him look like a prince from a dangerous fairy tale, and I wore ivory silk that Mrs. Castellano swore his mother would have loved. Marco stood as best man, surprisingly emotional for someone who killed people for a living. When Dante kissed me after we exchanged vows, simple platinum bands we'd chosen together, I heard him mutter, "About damn time." That night, Dante carried me over the threshold of the master bedroom I'd been slowly moving into anyway. He made love to me with devastating slowness, worshipping every inch of my body like I was something sacred, whispering promises in Italian and English until I fell apart in his arms. Mine, he breathed against my throat. My wife. My Emma. Yours, I agreed, no longer fighting the truth of it. Always yours. Life as Dante's wife was nothing like I'd imagined. Yes, there was danger. Threats that materialized and were eliminated before I even knew they existed, thanks to his paranoid protection. Yes, there was violence he tried to shield me from, but that I inevitably glimpsed in bloodied knuckles and tense phone calls in the middle of the night. But there was also beauty, Dante spoiling me with trips to cities I'd only dreamed of visiting, learning Italian so I could understand when he whispered sweet things in the darkness. Watching him slowly soften, the monster becoming more man with each passing month, I started volunteering at a women's shelter, using Dante's money and connections to help women escape situations, not unlike my own had been, minus the falling in love part. He never questioned my need for purpose beyond being his wife, never tried to make me into something I wasn't. And then, 5 years after that drunken night that changed everything, I discovered I was pregnant. I told him in the garden, on the anniversary of our first meeting. He'd surprised me with a perfectly restored vintage motorcycle. I'd mentioned once, months ago, that I'd always wanted to learn to ride. The fact that he remembered such a small detail still made my heart ache. I have something to tell you, I said, watching him adjust the bike's mirrors with boyish enthusiasm I rarely saw. If it's about the helmet color, I can get it changed. I'm pregnant. He froze mid-adjustment, then slowly turned to face me. What? I pulled the test from my pocket, holding it out like proof. Almost 8 weeks. I wanted to be sure before I told you." For a moment, he just stared, and I couldn't read his expression. Fear crept in. What if he didn't want children? We'd never really discussed it, too caught up in each other to think about expanding our dangerous little world. Then he crossed the distance between us in 2 strides, dropping to his knees in front of me. His hands came to rest on my still flat stomach with reverent care, and when he looked up at me, tears tracked down his face. "A baby," he whispered. "Our baby." Relief flooded through me. "You're happy? Happy?" He laughed, the sound broken and beautiful. "Emma, you've given me everything. A reason to be better, to want more than just power and revenge. And now," his voice cracked, "now you're giving me a family, something I never thought I'd have again after my mother died." He stood, pulling me into his arms and kissing me with desperate tenderness. Against my lips, he murmured, "Thank you. Thank you for stumbling into my room drunk. Thank you for staying. Thank you for loving a monster and making him want to be a man."